Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And Joe, that was a great presentation. You know, when I think about the kind of work that Joe is doing, and as you all go back, you think about, you know, how do you achieve the aspirations of these digital disciplines? Because when I think about the number of companies that made up an indices like the Dow Jones or the S&P 500 just 10 or 15 years ago, there are a lot of companies that didn't choose wisely, and they don't make up that. And I think as we approach this whole topic of digital transformation, which I think needs to start at the top, there's a lot of block and tackling. I've got some excellent CEOs. I'm going to ask them to each talk just for maybe 10 seconds or less to introduce who they are, and then we'll dive right in. I'm also expecting lots of dialogue with the audience. So think about some questions. This is a freewheeling 4 or 5 guys sitting around having a lively discussion, and I want you all to join in with us. So, Eric, why don't you kick off the intro?
Sure, thanks, Bob. My name is Eric Simone, and I am the founder and CEO of an Internet of Things enterprise software company based in Austin, Texas.
Great, Daniel.
Hey, good afternoon. I think it's afternoon, yeah. My name is Daniel Potts. I'm the CEO of Cog Systems. At Cog Systems, we secure IoT. So as Jack Madden joked earlier on his panel today, we're trying to add an S into IoT. How hard can it be? I don't know. So we work with connected device manufacturers together to bring security, robustness, and functional richness to the platforms that they're building and deploying.
Behnia, I'm the CEO of PowWow Mobile. Our company focuses on software that modernizes and mobilizes enterprise workflows and applications. Prior to that, I was the CTO for BMC Software, so it's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Fouad, the co-founder and CEO of Sapho. We help customers like Johnson & Johnson, Fannie Mae, and CBS triple worker productivity and satisfaction with our modern portal.
Great. So, Fouad, I'm going to start down that end. We'll work this way. The question I'd like you guys to talk about is, given your positions in the company, you obviously have to drive digital transformation within your own organizations, but we have a lot of end-user organizations out there, and I know you meet with a lot of end-user organizations. These are your customers. That's how you make your livelihood. So what do you see as you interface with a lot of your customers about what digital transformation means to them? How do they define it? How do they begin to approach it?
Cool. Well, you know, digital transformation is a great big buzzword. I'm sure you guys have heard buzzwords for the last 20 years. What we see is actually kind of 2 different pathways at most of the large companies that we service. You know, digital transformation can mean, you know, on one hand, how do I use technology? How do I leverage technology to actually drive productivity gains, to drive value for my enterprise, reduce headcount, or get more from the headcount that I have? That's one avenue of digital transformation that we're seeing at large companies. And then there's a second, you know, that we're seeing at big companies, which is more around how do I build a modern enterprise for modern employees? So, you know, do I have the ability to schedule conference rooms with iPads? Do I have digital sign-in at the front desk? You know, do I have a modern messaging system, you know, for people to collaborate on? They're both very viable pathways, both with demonstrable ROIs, but we tend to see people bucket into those 2 pathways at all the large enterprises that we've been going to.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think the one other area that we see in addition to that tends to be around customer-facing or customer-touching services. Many organizations are really reinventing the front office. There's been a ton of work done around cloud and reducing costs, increasing agility on the back end. A lot of companies are finding that, you know, the Uber example is a perfect one. That's all about front-end transformation to make services easier to consume and make the employees that service those much more enabled.
Yeah, I agree. I think for us and for our customers, it is, as you said, it's about ROI, looking at the cost benefit. So even internally, when we're looking to automate a lot of what we do, you know, in terms of our development process or the building we're in itself, you know, we look at what the benefit is. It could be saving off power bill. It could be, you know, reduced headcount, increased bandwidth, those kind of things. And for our customers, it's the same thing. They look to use our technology to do something they couldn't do before for some gain.
And I definitely agree with everyone here, Fouad. It's very broad. I completely agree. What I'm seeing is a lot of my traditional manufacturing and hardware customers are transforming into software enterprises and customers. You know, with digital transformation, a lot of the challenges, look, there's a lot of technical challenges. I think it's more business and new business models. Oh. So I'm seeing, for example, Stanley Black & Decker is looking at, you know, how do I create products as a service as opposed to just products? How do I transform my manufacturing and the manufacturing systems I sell to my customers into more software-oriented solutions? And it's a massive transformation. And it's hard to get the skills on staff when you're Stanley Black & Decker. Not that they're not a great company, but you're in competition now with the Oracle, Amazons, Microsofts of the world. So I think the challenges are more kind of transformational in terms of how you structure the company and vision, and then how you build new divisions around digital transformation.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that a lot of the conversations around digital transformation don't necessarily start at the top of the organization. I think this is such a massive, quote, transformation that it needs to. I think the second thing is that, as you're beginning to point out, that there are two big pieces. There is the investment in infrastructure and what that remodel looks like. And I think as organizations look to remodel, they're looking for new business growth. They're looking at new, diverse supplier chains, right? But it's also about culture, because at the end of the day, if you don't, it feels like to me, I don't know what you're seeing, if you don't see the culture changes. So it's about people and it's about technology. Do you guys agree? Do you see that within your environments?
Absolutely. I think, you know, CIOs have competing priorities today more than ever before, and they have competing choices. You can start by focusing internally and try to make your employees more productive. You have to do some of that if you're going to attract and retain the best talent. Also, you're under attack with these disruptors from the outside, and so you are forced to transform your business and make it more digital. No CIO that I know gets triple the budget what they had before. Right. So it becomes this very difficult set of steps. Most innovation doesn't happen in the boardroom. And in many ways, we're now seeing the test tube labs of innovation compared to the next 3 or 4 years in terms of the waves of innovation that needs to come in. So it's people, process, and technology. Yeah. Process plays a big role because you have to go from the as-is process to the to-be process. You need people who are bold and innovative and can really not be afraid of change.
Right.
And I see it happening from both sides. There's grassroots effort departmentally with folks going through digital transformation and picking their own tools and their own process to digitize or put IoT in place. But I see those island projects struggling unless you've got top-down support. So unless you have from the CEO down saying, look, we are going to invest this amount of money to transform our business, or we may be out of business in a decade or 2 decades.
Is there enough of that going on? Because I remember the early days of Wi-Fi adoption, of mobility adoption. They started with these little rogue, line of business or collective group of people that decided on doing something in the lunchroom, and the next thing you know, they carried it back into the office. Do you see enough of those kind of momentum to survive? Can they?
No,
I don't think it's the right approach either.
I think it's got to start at the top. Yeah. I think, somebody here said it was a state of mind. It 100% has to be a state of mind driven by the exec levels, the CEOs, because if they don't buy into why you would need to do a digital transformation, there won't be budget, right, and it won't ultimately be successful. And it's not just a issue of IT spend. We deployed at one of our customers is Northwestern Mutual up in Milwaukee, and we were up there, visiting with the technology team, and they've got these beautiful new buildings, with 8 cafeterias. I mean, it's nicer than the Google campus in Mountain View. Wow. And we were joking with the CIO, and I was like, you guys didn't invest in these buildings that have beautiful conference systems and beautiful, TVs and a sign-in thing to sell more insurance policies. you invested in this because you actually want to change the environment that your employees are working in. You want to change the way they think about Northwestern Mutual and being a part of that. And so, you know, to kind of my original point around what digital transformation is, if you're trying to just change the mindset of being kind of an old economy company, you know, you've got to have buy-in at the top, because eventually if somebody tries to start something from the bottom, they'll run into hurdles, they'll run into budget issues, they'll run into challenges with IT. But if you have that buy-in from the top, it's amazing what can happen.
And I think that's an important point. It's about change. Some of us love change. You know, we try to kind of harness it and, you know, go with it. But I think for most people, change is, you know, it's hard, right? So the whole organization in many cases needs to change. And as an example, you know, when we look at what we do and try to bringing that to market, and as you mentioned, a lot of the disruptors, you know, they look fast, right? Or at least initially they're fast. But to change that, so for example, for us, you know, looking at how you deliver a product, if we're producing a mobile phone and trying to, you know, produce it, develop it, get it to market, get the feedback, and improve the product again.
Right.
That cycle of iteration is quite slow. It could be 1 to 2 years. So we look at how can you make that quicker? And so if you say, okay, I want to do continual releases of software or hardware or both, and try to get that down to 8 weeks, then if you think about how to achieve that, you require change through the whole organization. Development processes, your marketing, your sales engine, you know, all your logistics, you know, using different tools and so on.
It's also a mindset change, right? I think the work I've done with Ford Motor Company, they don't think of themselves anymore as car manufacturers. They think of themselves in the transportation business. Joe mentioned the pizza company that sees themselves as an IT company. Do you see those kinds of emotional changes, I guess, to how people view their business? And do you have any examples that you've seen in
Yeah, I have a good example, and I think sometimes companies have to go through a tough, challenging period to understand that the old ways doesn't work. So sometimes change is actually enforced on you by your competition or by customer sat. So the example we have is Delta Airlines. You know, they were in the news, all over the news all last year with outages and long lines, and you know, that drove their innovation team to come out with a completely new way of checking in passengers. And in fact, they just won an innovation award on a project we worked with them on how to redefine the airport experience to be more and more like an Apple retail experience. That wasn't budgeted as a nice to have. You know, that was budgeted because they needed to fundamentally rethink the process. It actually ended up saving them a lot more money, and it's actually a lot better for the agents. So I see that trend continuing, that, you know, obviously the folks that are the disruptors have both the people and the investments to organically induce change. I think some of the laggards and some of the followers are the ones that need to bring in some of that change DNA, change agents that know how to do this.
But again, there's also two pathways, right? You know, again, there's the Ford Motor Company that now sees itself as a software company. Then, you know, again, there's some people there that need that marketing spin. They're going to have to come up with kind of this pathway for, hey, this is how I'm going to future-proof my business. We also are running into people who, hey, I have a great business. I need to extract more value from it, right? And again, we cannot eschew that in the quest for digital transformation and, you know, everybody is an innovator. You know, I was with the CIO at ConocoPhillips, and, you know, he tells me, if you can save me 0.5 point on productivity, you know, that's worth $800 million to my business.
Right.
Right? And so there is a digital transformation pathway for people that don't want to be, you know, hey, I'm going to be the next Tesla, or, you know, I'm going to Uberize, you know,
you don't have
cardboard
to be
boxes, right?
a unicorn company to do this, right?
No, not at all.
That's what you're and I see that in healthcare too. If you save a fraction of 1% in healthcare,
massive.
this is $1 trillion, you know, change to that business.
That's right.
But Bobby, you asked if we're seeing enough of this from the top
That's
down.
where I was going to bring you
and
back.
I'm going to say no, not even close, especially in the U.S.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a few companies really taking that step. I'm seeing a lot of marketing around transformation and less movement, in all honesty.
Yeah, yeah.
I've now, in my little subset, I've seen more movement in Europe, in Germany, and in England, because the government gets involved in moving some of these projects forward. In the U.S., it's a little bit tougher
You know, I hear in Europe especially, but also in Canada as well, but less in the States, where people, when they talk about digital disruption in the context of digital transformation, you know, that word disruption is such a negative connotation. And I think it's a threat to someone's job, it's a threat to some technology, whatever it is, but people feel like they're looking to de-emphasize disruptive and get on the positive side of transformation in their business, right?
Yeah, it's all about removing friction. I mean, I look at it very much as, you know, not having to go see a teller in order to do my banking removes the friction out of my life.
Right.
It saves the bank a bunch of money.
Right.
But I don't think if they marketed that as disruption, that would be the right thing to do, particularly if they're a financial institution.
Right, right.
So it's all about removing friction. It's taking all the speed bumps, whether it's customer service or employee services and productivity,
Right.
and just giving people what they want with some control still, so all of the automation and control can continue to exist, but it's about removing the friction.
But organizationally, where I've seen struggles is when, one, there's no CEO backing, and then the department, or there isn't, say, and you know, in my case, an Internet of Things accelerator or a digital accelerator unit that has the power to go and transform the profit-making business units. And this is where you have conflict, right? Yeah. So what I see is you see folks in the factory floor, right? The OT folks, the operational technology folks. Right. And you've got a guy that's been doing this for 55 years, and he's used to putting his hand on that compressor and feeling the vibration. He doesn't want to have a sensor streaming data to a platform, to a dashboard. He's like, no, I know my business.
Right.
And then you get the IT folks that are getting involved with the OT folks, and these folks don't even speak the same languages anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I think I love talking about technology, and that's fun, but that's the easier part of our problem. It's organizational change and resistance to that change.
Well, that's probably why the smaller businesses, you know, the young startups, you see more disruption, you see more of this change being implemented as opposed to the big organizations.
The other side of this is, Kia, you sort of brought up the Delta model, where they created incremental budget to solve a hot incremental problem that occurred and got a lot of media attention. It feels like that's not the right way to approach digital transformation either, right? No. Because otherwise you're playing whack-a-mole across your organization.
But people have a lot of firefighting budget that's built into the IT budgets over the last 20 years. And if you took a little bit of that and applied it to fire prevention, or why do you even have fires, and you know, kind of actually improving the process.
That's interesting. How many of you people look at digital transformation and begin shifting budgets from areas like maybe disaster recovery or some other fire alarm budget that is sitting off to the side? Anybody have those kinds of approaches to digital transformation? None here. I mean, it's certainly possible, right?
Yeah.
But
in the case of Delta, it was the COO who made the decision.
Yeah.
So they had top-down, and they said, we can continue to pay for the data center and connectivity, but I want to get off the network, because the big problem they had was the airport networks were saturated and not reliable.
Yeah.
So they basically invented something that bypasses it, goes through a secure 3G network.
Right. Well, and the audience may be thinking planned response versus
but I credit the
response,
innovation team.
Yeah.
I mean, I credit the people at Delta who were thoughtful enough and brave enough to say, let's actually
Let's take the risk and make it happen.
Do exactly what Joe was mentioning before. Don't do incremental change, do a step change.
When you think about digital transformation, this idea of risk comes up because there's technical evolution risk, there's technically new adoption risk, there's business risk. What are you seeing in, you know, some of the customers that you've talked to and things that you see within your own business?
Yeah, I'll start. I see a lot of fear because of so wide open it is, and fear of making the wrong decision, right? And I sympathize with these folks. Is if you look at the space, I mean, look, mobile was the precursor to what we're dealing with now in IoT. I mean, I think mobile is IoT. It's all part of this, right? And people have these debates. IoT's real, by the way. It's not a buzzword, just it's people are spending money, but it's fear because there's 700 different technology solutions, or appear to be, right? And fear of being wrong.
Right.
And so I'm seeing some of the big brands with their marketing induce some of that fear because they make it seem like, hey, just press a button and I've got artificial intelligence here and I can have my airline speak to my constituents. And I think that's a disservice to the marketplace.
Yeah.
I'd rather have some more real
Right.
than some of this hype. And I think getting to real vendors that work together and have an open community with open access to software and open APIs is a much better way than some of the big box vertical solutions that we're seeing. So fear would be my message. They're just
Right.
afraid to move forward.
Any other comments along those lines?
Yeah, you know, we've been fortunate to deploy at places like Charles Schwab and Fannie Mae and a bunch of other financial services guys, and I will tell you that not only do we have to fit into their security policies now, we have to fit into their compliance policies as well. And, you know, it makes sense. You know, there was a big hack at HBO here for the last season of Game of Thrones, and it came in through one of their vendors.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as you guys are looking at startups, you know, pushing and making sure that they have all their security certs, all their compliance certs, you know, it's basically table stakes at this point to service Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
I'd add for me, I think a lot of our customers, you know, we're providing, I hope, enabling technology for transformation. So many of them look to the opportunity, you know, once they know they have those tools, what they can then do to that. So it's the opportunity related to how to compete, how to do the next evolution of their products, you know, all those kind of positive things.
You know, the other side, I look at digital transformation as sort of a four-party model. The first two parts we sort of talked about is the infrastructure and the culture within the organization. The other is more of the customer-facing side. And when I think about mobility, well, before I answer the question, how many people here use an app on your phone to either make an airplane reservation or using it as your boarding pass?
It's everyone.
How many of you had ordered a taxi cab or Uber over your phone? How many of you had ordered a pizza to go or some food to go? So it's fascinating that there are lots of examples where people have reached for the mobile phone first, right? Now, how many people beyond, if I take email away, and I take calendaring away, and I take conference room scheduling away, how many people on, let's see, more than 5 times a week reach for their mobile phone to do something that's an enterprise-related kind of application on their phone?
Does Twitter count?
Put social media or Facebook aside, right? Yeah. Look at the ratio, right? This
is the frustration we see. People want their Mondays to be like their Sundays. It's like they show up to work and it's like a time machine back to the age of desktops and ugly apps and logging into 15 different systems and not being able to do your work fast.
Yeah, you were going to say something?
No, I was saying yes, I log into it, but yeah, no, I agree. But you know, again, you got to be careful with mobility as kind of the you know, silver bullet to solve the problems for these digital transformations. You know, again, I think the issues that you brought up first around culture and infrastructure, that's got to get solved first, you know, before you go and do something for mobility. Although I will tell you, these like exec on the go things are really good for getting the executive team happy with you quickly, if you're looking for like a near-term win.
But if I think about Joe's you know, digital disciplines, as I think about other work that I've done around infrastructure and channels and technologies, I'm wondering if a company that has made these kind of investments on customers and you start thinking about internal transformation around business, if they haven't already begun, as many companies have not, transforming the mobility aspect, can they really be in a position to start the rest of that transformation process?
I mean, I think the challenge with starting with mobility, do you work in an office?
Yeah, my office is in airplanes, hotels, and conferences, and stages.
When you're in a hotel, and you're working, where are you sitting?
It depends what I'm doing.
No, when you're working at a hotel, where do you sit?
Sometimes on my bed, sometimes on a desk.
On a desk. See, I think this is the challenge with mobility, right? Because the juxtaposition you're giving is, do you order a pizza or a taxi cab with your phone? Well, of course.
Yeah.
Like the context for you ordering a cab is you're standing outside and you need to ride somewhere.
Right.
But when you're at work, guess where people are spending the majority of their time? They're sitting at their desk. And so
Certainly some
when you
portion
think
of the workforce.
when you
So,
think,
yeah.
sure, there are field workers, there are the delivery guys, there's the guys who are running cable for AT&T, and yes, there's going to be mobility solutions for those. But when you think about a digital transformation that really hits at a broad swath of the employee base, and you don't think about desktop as part of that digital transformation,
right.
well then, you're missing 90% of the time that people are working. And I think, that's the challenge that I have with kind of having mobility as one of those big four. It's a piece of it for sure, but it's just another endpoint, right? You still have to kind of get the culture right and the mindset right of, hey, do we want to transform these things and make them usable?
I think you're right. I think it's a great setup for saying that there is a culture among the workforce about how they use things external to the company that hasn't necessarily translated inside, right? That's the first part. And then we think about the resistance to change that Eric was talking about. And Daniel, you kind of begin to think, how do you unwind that culture of resistance and drive it towards culture of transformation? And whether you guys are beginning to see that or not.
Yeah. A lot of it is about empowering people to make these decisions, and there's got to be a good business outcome first, right? We're going to go do this rail business because we're going to power these railroad crossings because we're going to save $700 million because we can get rid of 3G and go over our radio network. But then you empower your team to say, we're going to go attack this mission,
right.
and we're going to go figure out what technology and services and system integrators to use to go attack this. Then I see people rally around the mission.
Right.
But if it's just transformation for transformation's sake, then it's typically, you get lost.
Right.
That's what I've seen.
I think you're hitting on like an absolutely critical point, that it's not like you flip a switch one day and it goes from 0 to 1. It just,
right.
When we did our turnaround at CBS, I used to call it the who moved my cheese problem. When you try to change a workflow, people lose their minds and get upset at you, and it increases the resistance when you're just trying to help them. There was this book that came out called Hit Makers that talked about kind of building hit products, and it talked about this architect from the 50s named Raymond Loewy, and he had this concept that was called Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. And the idea is that people want new stuff, but they want it to be familiar.
Right.
And so as you're thinking about your digital transformation strategy, how do you take advantage of these things that are already familiar to your end users and slowly work things out, right?
And building against the culture, or are you suggesting you advance the culture?
Well, in their consumer lives today, they're already comfortable with things like Facebook, right? They're comfortable getting their information in a feed, right? So how do you make your touch points to that end user feel like more like a feed, right? How do you make email feel more transactional and less worky, right? How do you take advantage of the investments that you've made in things like SharePoint, right? Or your internal comm system, right? So one of the things that we do for our customers is when we unbundle, their big systems of record into atomic units of work, these little, simple single-purpose applications, we dump them into any endpoint so that you're not radically changing someone's behavior, saying, oh, here's yet another screen for you to go to. It's saying, oh, hey, you know what a card looks like because you get them in your Facebook, you get them in your Instagram, you get them in your Twitter. Now I'm just giving you a work card and I'm putting it where you already work today. And I think, as you think about digital transformation, again, this Maya concept is one that I always go back to, right? Most advanced yet acceptable. It's got to be familiar but new.
Kia, when you were working on the Delta, I know we talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of people that were being called out to use these new solutions were not necessarily technologists. So you had to spend a lot of work in making this less technology scary and more user-friendly, because I think user experience has got to be reigned.
No, it's absolutely critical, but in our studies and in our contacts, we don't see the users as being the problem. It's the people who design these enterprise systems.
The back end.
And just lack of UX skills in enterprise. Most enterprise-facing apps don't go through user testing, right? So it's a classic non-intuitive. I mean, the reason all of us can board a flight without needing to call tech support is that the apps are intuitive and simple. You don't put 600 fields, on a screen like, software, products of the past. And I think the real problem is that both the IT leaders and the users have a very fragmented app portfolio to deal with. And all CIOs have really, 4 options. We call them the 4 R's. Retire apps. They should do a lot more of that. Get rid of the ugly old ones. That's not going to be overnight, so it's a phase. Refactor them, so modernize the front end or modernize the microservices, take that monolithic app and basically refactor it down. Do a rewrite, which is very expensive traditionally. And rewrite it with omni-channel in mind so they can run anywhere. Or replace, get rid of the custom tool and go with a SaaS solution.
Right.
Those are the 4 R's. Every organization, once they get comfortable with digital transformation, has to be bold enough to apply that to their dozens and dozens and hundreds of applications that they have if they want to move forward.
I guess the other thing is about scale. You and I, Eric, have talked a little bit about getting security to scale. Daniel and I, you were kind of talking about some of the complexities of driving this. I saw your presentation around nested VPNs and these new areas that people are beginning to say. Let's talk a little about scale and how it relates, and whether it's in the context of IoT or data collection, or what do we do?
I mean, a lot of scaling is you've got to work with what's there. So I mean, I agree with what was said about the 4 R's, but sometimes there may be a 5th R, which is run away and just leave the thing alone. I mean, seriously, we used to modernize these things, and so scale is you can't build in silos. Like I can't go take the latest new software and build an IoT or mobile system and say that's great without understanding it's got to integrate with some RPG or COBOL system written in 1972. And I need to make that thing responsive for whatever app or IoT system it has to feed. So you can't forget what's there. Yeah. So enterprise IoT in my world, or enterprise transformation and digital transformation for big enterprises, has to incorporate the old with the new. I always laugh a little bit when I hear about standardization. I hear the big S word all the time. I don't know, I've been in this industry 30 years and I've seen various standardizations. There'll always be a myriad of standardizations on enterprise integration and device integration, right?
The old saying, the good news about standards that exist, the bad news about standards, there's so many to choose from.
There's so many, and so the thing is, you've got to be able to be open and map to these things, and then for scale, you've got to be able to trust a vendor that has software that is, one, built to scale and built for secure from the ground up from day one.
Right.
If we look at this mobile world, you guys probably will agree, there's been a lot of mistakes made in early mobility in terms of security, and that's one of the things that we looked at was, hey, look, who's building a solution like this that is secure from the ground up and can map to security solutions that have been around for decades, like LDAP or RACF even, if you go back to the old days, and it's a multi-layer problem. Right. So I think the summary of that is be flexible enough to integrate with what's there. If it's not the latest, great, but work with it, and then be flexible enough to adopt new technologies in the future. Both with your staff and with your software.
Right.
Yeah, when we think of scale, so that's what we're about, right? Figuring out how to scale, that's what most businesses do. So then we very naturally lean towards automation. And then some cool transformations happen then. To automate at scale, you get hopefully a good user experience with fewer passwords, fewer kind of gates and bottlenecks to work through.
Right.
And getting that all together, you have a nice tool for transformation there.
Interesting.
Scale could actually become a much bigger problem as you automate and transform certain steps, because it might actually expose bottlenecks in your business processes that you never thought about. So you think about putting a front end on a grocery store, you might take a lot more orders than you ever did before, and it exposes a different part of the business. So it's end-to-end scale that's critical. So not just one area, but looking at it end-to-end.
I think it always exposes bottlenecks.
Yep.
Yeah. The next problem.
And part of it is look ahead, right? Yeah. If we're only connecting, a few 100,000 devices today concurrently, make sure that you can do 100 million already, right? And work with some big iron vendors. I mean,
can you model that?
Yeah, so we've done it with Oracle, right, where we can do 100 million concurrent device test, and we're lucky because I have a CTO and an engineering team that's constantly concerned about what if Stanley all of a sudden lights up, or what if BNSF all of a sudden lights up. We better be ready for that. Right. And so I want to have a big partner or network of partners that can test and scale with us, because I wouldn't trust just little old ClearBlade alone. I would trust us with Oracle or us with IBM or a partner of ours.
Right. How important do you think in this whole evolution of digital transformation, with you as suppliers, but also within organizations, to look at their suppliers is a key or critical need? Are they a critical need in the quest for digital transformation for your business, but also for the end user community?
I mean, I think you have to have a partner community and a network of, in my world, hardware suppliers, system integrators, resellers,
right.
Vertically focused partners that know how to do smart buildings, that know the train industry, that know the manufacturing industry, because look, we're honest, we're not experts in any one of these verticals. We're
right.
middleware nerds at the end of the day,
right.
but you better have a network of folks that know that's domain space.
Right.
AI is a great one. I like to use machine learning or expert systems more. You just don't press a button and turn on AI. You have to have domain expertise, data scientists, the data, and the ability to model that data. And it's got to be people that understand that space inside and out, not just some random computer science person.
Yeah, I'd add to that too. I think one of the experiences we have with many of our partners is if it's about transformation, they're part of that problem. You know, they're another team, another entity that also may need to undertake some transformation for it to all work out.
I look at suppliers more as enablers. You know, at the end of the day, it goes back to what we started on. You have to have kind of the internal will as an organization to want to do a digital transformation. Your suppliers can give you roadmaps and best practices and say, hey, here's a way we've seen it done to yield great results. Right. But unless you have that internal catalyst that's pushing for a transformation, it's just, no vendor is going to come in and wave their hands and magically make digital transformation happen.
Right, right. Pause for questions for the audience. I'm sure there are lots of questions out there. Maybe not. I see everybody. No questions. Gotta be questions. There's questions about scaling security. Maribel's got a question.
There you go, Maribel.
Oh, there we go.
Don't ask about one-night stands.
Wow.
Sorry.
Okay,
Joe set the tone.
All right, so what's the one thing that surprised you as you were working with customers building digital transformation strategies?
Good question.
What surprised me was how quick they went to go build a solution without understanding how they were going to sell that solution or the business side of it. That blew me away. And everything went really fast, and all of a sudden you get to the business people, and it was like, did we build the right thing, and why did we build this thing?
So we said earlier that getting the new business models in place are important, but the thing that surprised you is how many people are, you know, shoot, aim, ready.
Yeah. In a couple of cases, I was happy to see them move quick, but then I think we've learned that you've got to have the business side dovetail with the tech folks.
Yeah.
And then even if there's, from the CEO down, backing for this, there's still a lot of other parts of the organization that have to come together. And I just think that this transformation, it's, again, from a business side, takes time.
That's our experience too. You know, we've had a lot of exciting groups will work within a big company, but if it requires internal buy-in, and generally it does, you know, again, it needs everyone aligned with that kind of mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Pleasantly surprised to see alignment when there's business folks at the table as sponsors and willing to drive the change, you know, looking for IT to enable it. The exact opposite as well, where it's a classic almost innovation by committee or random acts of innovation trying to, basically say we're doing digital transformation.
I've been surprised at the timing of the change. This today versus 12 months ago, the number of CEOs at large companies that have taken an active interest in digital transformation and are coming in and basically demanding that there be change. I mean, it's like night and day over the last 12 months.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So the Hitmakers reference was interesting. I read that book also. And so, but it begs the question, which is, if you want to do like radical but recognizable, do you start with something radical and then you put a veneer on it so that people would recognize it? Or do you start with things that people recognize and try to figure out how to transform them?
We've taken the latter approach, which is start with something that people recognize and then, you know, train them in the opposite direction. So with our modern portal, you know, we create a feed. So we integrate easily into all of your systems of record. We make it easy to unbundle them into these little atomic units of work, and then we allow them to go to any endpoint. So into your SharePoint, into your WebSphere portal, into your IBM connections, into your Slack, into your Microsoft Teams, into your Outlook actionable messages. It doesn't matter. But the idea is Facebook has already done our work for us. They've trained, 1.8 billion people a month that, having a integrated feed that has push notifications to you that allows you to do simple single-purpose actions is actually a way to do things. And so when we go to a customer, we always tell them, look, there's 3 users of our product. There's the sysadmin that deploys us, there's the builder that builds these little units of work, and then there's the end user. And for that end user, the experience has to be as easy to use as Facebook. Did you have to do a training session to learn how to use Facebook? Did you have to watch a video to use Instagram? No, right? The answer is no, right? None of us had to sit down for a 6-hour session, to learn how to use my HR software and then forget how it works 3 months later and submit 8 million IT tickets, right? That's not how it worked. We went in there, into Facebook, and it just magically works. And I think that's the kind of experience, as you think about digital transformation, that you've got to deliver, right? And that's why I love that Maya example, because I think it actually does give us a roadmap on how to affect change without having that who moved my cheese problem.
We've talked a little bit about IoT at this conference, but I just feel like I need to lay this question on the table. Is IoT hype? Is it real? Is it necessary to digital transformation? And when the companies, you guys are pretty embedded in that market, so I'm taking a little swipe at your business model a little bit.
I may recuse myself from this answer.
But there are a lot of people in the audience saying, look, with all the things, I've got cultural change, I'm remodeling my infrastructure to make it at least as agile as my customers and my employees are, and then we got this mobility thing, and then we get this IoT thing, so
I think it's, as you said, it's more mobile, so what's happening, everything's getting closer. Your 5G is bringing everything closer, lowering latency. The cost of compute is coming down. Right. We're able to, implement new things. We're all using Fitbits and smartwatches and light bulbs, and so IoT is happening, and hopefully it's transparent.
Well, and you're hearing a lot about edge computing. Mobile is edge computing.
Right.
Edge computing's real, and it's nothing more than centralized versus decentralized processing. It's go back to client server. We've been doing this for decades. It'll be a constant. It's not an either or, it's an and. You're going to want a solution that's able to be tuned for the edge or tuned for the centralized processor, whether that's a cloud or an on-prem. But IoT is, obviously real. People are spending real money, and it's weaving into everything we're going to be doing. So I like to always use this stupid example. With the last 20 years, what have we really done with the public internet? Social media, customer relationship management, e-commerce, some dating stuff. Let's be honest, it's been low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And now it's really starting to weave itself into the very fabric of everything that we interact with. This is going to take several more decades, but there are not enough double E's or computer scientists on the planet to do all that we want to do. So it's going to
and all the data that's flowing through this, right?
So I think it's all part of the digital transformation process, and it depends on where you are in that adoption curve.
Yeah, I agree with your point. It is going to take a few decades, right? We're still in the infrastructure and deployment phase of IoT. So, as you guys think about your digital transformation strategy, put a timeline against it. If this is a 30-year plan, it's great. The amount of data that you're going to generate from IoT is going to be amazing. But we used to have a joke at CBS. Everyone was obsessed with big data, big data, big data. We didn't even get our little data right. And so, to your point on low-hanging fruit, I still think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit at the enterprise, even before we kind of get to the unleash the power of, IoT over the next few decades.
But my view is there are industries that cannot afford to ignore IoT. And there are other industries that can maybe put it on a timeline and kind of adopt it a little bit later.
Right.
It's a vertical, this is one of those technologies that's very vertical specific.
Right.
If you have a ton of maintenance, a lot of equipment out there, you can't afford not to have sensors, or at least rethink that if you're a utility. But if you're a government agency providing social services, there's no sensors or machines. You get a lot more value out of mobilizing or getting your field force enabled and transformed.
Right. It does seem architecturally. Was there another question? Oh, sorry. Jack?
I had a question. Well, I was going to comment, but Kia, you already hit my point on the head. The answer to your question, Bob, is really simple. what things matter to your company. Like, I work for a company that we're entirely online media. We don't have any things, so we're not going to be in IoT for who knows how long, unless it's, you know, connecting our conference rooms, putting beacons in or something like that. So the answer is simple.
Interesting. Make it more simple.
Heart rate monitors while you're typing your stories.
All right, I guess that's going to be our last question. I was going to talk a little bit about architecture, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time, and good job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.